Okay. Well, to the 50-second call.
Does that mean it's been 2 years?
Yes, because we missed a couple along the way, so it's definitely been 2 years.
Okay.
All right, cool. So here is the crazy on the agenda today. We will start with testing and release updates. You saw the V1.0 release. I think it's pretty much the same as the candidate release, other than some additional testing and things. As I mentioned last time, Xiaowei and myself and Proto a bit are looking to revamp the way the test vectors are output, which will be some changes on your end on how you induct them in, but will greatly reduce test generation time and reduce the disk footprint, which will allow us to greatly, hopefully, extend the amount of test vectors. Throw in more random things and lots more operations and that kind of stuff. So that's in the works. It's probably not a huge priority to ship that in the next few weeks, but next 4 to 6 weeks probably get that out. Maybe we'll wait and get mainnet out first and then change test vectors under your feet. Cool. Any other testing updates?
Yeah, quick beacon fuzz update. That's okay.
Yep.
Cool. So over the last few weeks, we've been running our structural differential fuzzer, and we found 2 consensus-related vulnerabilities on Prism. The first one was an off-by-one bug in the committee index validation of the attestation processing, and the second one was basically using the wrong epoch when validating slashings for proposer slashings. These are all fixed now. That's why we can, I guess, talk about. There was also one minor non-exploitable spec divergence for TQ in the proposer slashing processing that was found on Prism a few weeks ago. We started working with a future Ethereum Foundation team member who will be joining the DevOps team there to essentially automate our deployment and monitoring of those fuzzers at scale on our AWS infrastructure. He's built a bunch of pretty handy Ansible scripts that are pretty much ready, and he should get that done actually today or tomorrow. In continuing the work on the custom fuzzing engine, it's working, but we only got the mutation-based version working, actually structured inputs. So the next thing we're working on now is adding that structural part of for that custom fuzzer. I'll be writing this up in a blog post. Hopefully, push that out over the next couple of days. But that's pretty much it.
Any questions for Mehdi?
I mean, on that note, there's actually going to be 2 people who are going to be joining the Ethereum Foundation very soon to help with security. And I guess we're still looking for talent and people interested. So if anyone's listening and knows any talented hacker, please send an email to eth2security@ethereum.org.
Yeah. Additionally, I think we're going to put out a few RFPs first to try to find some more external teams to help with testing of various things, some network testing, load testing, chaos testing, that kind of stuff. So if you're keen on that kind of stuff, keep your eyes peeled for those RFPs. Great. We're going to move. Any other testing discussion? Okay, cool. Moving on to all of y'all are very aware, Proto's been driving, getting some V1.0 testnets up. Toledo is up, and I believe there was an epoch with 100% attestation and participation, which is pretty cool. And that's looking stable. I know there were a few things to work through. I know, but all well there. And then there was some conversation past 36 hours about what to do with a larger scale testnet. Proto has prepared a contract with 100,000 validators and keys, and I believe the intention is to share those amongst the client teams and the EF to kick that off. ideally next week so we can get this going firmly before mainnet launch. And I woke up and there was a lot of conversation around what that actually means. What Piermont? Is that how you say that? Can an Australian correct me?
Correct.
Yep,
That's
Piermont.
perfect.
Piermont. What the fate of Piermont be? It seems like we will kind of kick it off ourselves, then open it up, make the config and stuff available for others to join, so that people can test 1.0 configurations and stuff, and to have that at least, and then circle back on the conversation after Genesis to think about what a sustainable testnet in the long run will look like. You know, should we up the ejection balance? Should we change the queue limits and stuff in that config for the sustainability and kind of user experience around that? That said, I believe in the conversation that I caught up with this morning, we hadn't picked when we're actually going to kick this off. So the deposit contract's there. We just need to set the config, which we can kind of tune the Genesis time however we want at this point. Proto, what are your thoughts? I know there's some ends up being some on your end. I know there's configuration work for clients and getting various nodes up. Is this something that we are looking to do Tuesday, looking to do Wednesday, Thursday of next week?
So the original idea was to launch on Tuesday. This was a while ago, though, and with Toledo, I think we have a better idea on like what the efforts are that are involved with getting another testnet up and running. So I'd like to just get some feedback from clients if they can confirm Tuesday, or alternatively we move it forward a few days.
I think Tuesday is fine on our end. A couple of days wouldn't hurt though, but we could do Tuesday.
For our Prism as well.
Yeah, good with Tuesday for Teku. Say no to in a couple more days.
So
Yeah, Wednesday is good.
Hearing Tuesday, although a couple days would work better. I think we can just do Wednesday just as well. So maybe we should just go for Wednesday.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. A little less weekend work.
Exactly. Okay, let's go for Wednesday. I'll set the configuration. Assume we can do the same Genesis time, noon UTC.
Works for me.
Yeah, cool. So if this is going to be a utility to validators over the next handful of weeks, maybe state in your Discord to not be overzealous on the amount of Gorley ETH they dump into this thing, because one whale could block up the queue at the current limits, and so maybe encourage validators to try one or two. Obviously that's not in our control, but hopefully it can be somewhat of utility to validators in the fix. Okay, anything else on this before we move on?
So about Toledo, the testnet will be running for at least a few more days. I wanted to give a shout out to the Beacon Chain Explorer who helped us get more insight into this. So the testnet is performing relatively well, if I can say so myself. And going like in the last few days, I wanted to test like some miscellaneous things, like the new Lighthouse slasher and these kind of things, where now that we have a net that we control and that we good insight in, handle things really well.
Yeah, great. And as for Madasha, well, for Piermont, we will get a launch pad up at a subdomain so that people can practice using that. And for Madasha, I'm based off of my read, I think we're going to at least publicly sunset support for it next week. I think that there's some will keep running nodes to test non-finality in some edge cases and stuff, but I think publicly we'll kind of stay fully degrade starting over the next few weeks. Anyone opposed to publicly sunsetting and stopping active support? Okay. R.I.P. Madasha.
So one thing to keep in mind, actually, is people. I think validators maybe do want to have some kind of environment where they can test their setup before they actually spin one up live. So if that's not Madasha, then what would we direct people to?
So Piermont, we're going to kick that off validators that we control, and next week also open it up for deposits.
And we'd be committing to run Piermont for some longer period of just...
Yes, at least through mainnet Genesis, after which a couple weeks have a conversation about what we might do to make a testnet more sustainable and user-friendly in the long term.
That makes sense.
Great. And I guess Forma that's in the activation queue currently and is close can keep running their nodes, and they will be activated because of the way the queue works. So, great.
Maybe for the new testnet, we could make the queues faster so that people can get in more quickly and test their setups.
Yeah, I'm not terribly opposed. I know some are hesitant to change configuration. If this is one of the reasons is to test mainnet configuration. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I'd prefer really plain mainnet parameters just to make sure that we're testing the right thing, especially during launch. Let me do whatever.
Yeah, again, I'm gonna encourage the community, try a validator or two. Not.
I'd also lean towards having the mainnet conf for now. I think it's helpful understanding of the times that they can expect to run, like the wait times and stuff they expect on mainnet.
Right.
We could also ask people to exit voluntarily as well too. That would help as well if people exit cleanly instead of just shutting off their nodes.
Yeah, agreed. I'll put that in Zinyokin in as well. Okay, anything else on testnets before we move on to client updates?
So one thing, we're working on some shorter lived testnets where just focus on Genesis. And so we have a configuration file ready to go into a client, do Genesis, then repeat it over and over again, ideally. So I think this is an effort we can run in parallel, but of this thing where we do want to repeat Genesis more often, and to enable us to configure the client without changing the internals.
Right. So that looks like -- data dir and things in Lighthouse, a very specific testnet configuration. What do you do? One very short-lived Genesis every week until Genesis. What's the goal here? The intent.
Something like that sounds good. For now, right now, we'll just focus on the Piermont Genesis. That's big enough and soon enough as it is.
Yeah.
But then after that, it does help to repeat Genesis more often.
Yeah, and I guess specifically, we've seen time and time again that the Genesis can be brittle, and we've seen kind of minor issues pop up in a lot of our testnets. So that's the motivation right there.
But I mean, sure, testing Genesis is good, but there's no actual expectation that we'll launch mainnet without a baked-in mainnet compliance. I mean, I think everybody's baking in states and expecting people to run with this baked-in state.
Yeah.
On 1.0 day.
Mm-hmm. But we've also seen other issues. I guess that following ETH1 issues, state mismatch issues, boot node issues, those ones, and just being able to find peers. I mean, maybe we don't have to do it every week until Genesis, but I would want to get another couple in, if possible.
Yeah, but that might be something.
I mean, what's
to
every week?
signal clearly.
It's like one or two more.
Well, I don't know. I don't know when Genesis is.
But I think it's super important that we're clear in signaling to people that they do need to update on the spot on the week that mainnet will happen, right?
I agree that if you're validating in Genesis, you should expect to be updating your software in that time and being pretty active during the time. And I will. The Sigma Prime's communications on that and the recent blog posts I think are really good. And if you want to communicate to your users in a similar way, I think that'd be really valuable.
Yeah, also just to remind everyone, I think I posted this in everyone's issues, have some way of quickly updating all your users that they need to install something, so that even if it happens 1 hour before Genesis and you want to push something, then you get all the stakers and not just leave it to chance.
Right.
So I think everyone should have an email list for critical issues.
Very much agreed. Okay, let's move on to client updates. Starting with Nimbus.
Hi. So it was very busy in the last 2 weeks. Starting with networking, we have improved again the tracking of resources. So in the past it was futures and memory. Now we are tracking streams and channels. We are also we have fixed some Gossip Sub audit issues. This was done late. One was not tested enough 3 weeks ago when it was time for it to be audited. So we tested a bit later. On the core parts, we had Toledo release. We are using Gossip 1.1 now on it. A lot of documentation changes. Regarding infra, some users mentioned that they didn't like being forced using WebSocket HTTPS support. We have also significantly improved if one chain sync and monitoring. And we pre-released 0.6 2 days ago with pre-built Linux binaries, and we are planning to do a new release today as well. And with that, we are gradually moving away from make files, and we will provide precompiled executable for all major platforms. So right now it's Linux, but we plan also for Windows, Mac, and ARM builds. We are also significantly reworking our release management for mainnet. So we are creating sanity checklists. We will create a mailing list, something that was mentioned just a bit before, some monitoring and a support coverage plan for team members. And also we have lessons learned in when we did directory rename for consistency or permission changes for security, because those created troubles for users. Either they were holding databases or they were used in systemd automated scripts and didn't work after changes that we made. So we will improve how we deal with those breaking changes. Also, we used to have a way to create deposits and validate our keys from Nimbus. Now, to avoid confusion and fight scam attempts, this is now undocumented and developers only. So there is really only one way to deposit, and it would be the EF launchpad. And that's it for us.
Got it. Thank you. How about Lodestar?
Hello. So we have not yet released a new release of Floatstar. We've been previously trying to get to a full Spec 1.0 candidate compatibility, and at this point we've got it down to everything but disk V 5.1. So that's really what we're focusing on this week. We finished with a rough draft of our BLST integration. Of course, it's a lot faster to use BLST. We may hold off on that until we can address like the browser compatibility issue, because right now it only works in Node.js. And we other things, we've gotten about 80% of the standard API, almost everything, I guess, but like the validator status endpoints, which I think are still possibly in play. And our validators using the standard API, so that's good.
Great, thank you. Let's do Prism.
Hey guys, so in the last 2 weeks, we have closed all the ongoing issues with our trail updates audit, and the audit report should be online and the people can take a look. We have made improvements to our initial syncing process. We have made it better at exploring forks during periods of non-finality. We are currently working on conforming to the Eth2 standard APIs, and we are working on testing peer scoring as well. And we're also working on the slasher interchange format. And the most important thing, we're focusing on our mainnet v1 release. And we're working on a set of issues that we want to close before November 24. And you can track those in our milestone within the repo. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Terrence. Lighthouse.
Hello, everyone. Paul here. So this week, we published a blog post about our plans for version 1 release. As discussed earlier, we're encouraging everyone to update in the week before Genesis so that they can get the Genesis state and they don't have to do the listening to Eth1 waiting for Genesis thing. So if you're going to be using Lighthouse from Genesis, then I recommend reading that blog post on Sigma Prime. Was it lighthouse.sigmaprime.io? We're also working on the standard API, implementing it and providing feedback to the spec. Our implementation is quite close, and we're working on events now. The slasher is in the final review stage. A release next week is likely. We're running 8 of these slashers on Toledo. We're setting up a production staking and monitoring infrastructure. Our second Lighthouse security review has been completed. No criticals were found. We're working to address the points raised this week and before Genesis. And we're feeling pretty confident for Genesis in a few weeks. Everyone's working hard to complete their pre-Genesis issues and PRs. That's it from me.
Great, thanks, Paul. And Teku.
Yeah, hey. We have published the mainnet ready release, and we'll be making mainnet the default in the release candidate next week. We now have mostly complete implementation of the common API, and we are going to deprecate legacy API on the next release. We have completed almost all spec release candidate 0 updates. The last one remaining is gossip message ID is now ready to be merged and will be in the next release, I hope. We add the feature to support us for snapshot sync from state alone. And it's actually very effective and allows to get fully up and running in a couple of minutes or so. We've made significant improvements to memory consumption by utilizing the proto array more widely. And also we have a couple of serious issues fixed. One is related to out of memory after long periods of non-finalization. And another one is related to stability of gas on Eth2.0 mainnet, and also there's a workaround transaction size limitation in Infra. That's it from Tickle.
Excellent. Thank you. And I believe that is everyone for today. Great. Let's move on to research updates. Who wants to get us started?
Small update about. Oops, go ahead. Okay, I have a short one about weak subjectivity. So Lighthouse, Prism, Teku, and Nimbus support weak subjectivity sync starting from a block root. And we have one major block explorer who's going to support, who's going to be an ETH2 weak subjectivity provider right from Genesis. That's Etherscan. Beaconche.in is going to do it shortly after launch. I'll be making a release for the weak subjectivity server that everyone on this call is encouraged to run. But overall, it's a great job, everyone. ETH2 will have weak subjectivity security right from Genesis.
Thanks for getting that out the door, did you?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Moving on.
So great. On data availability sampling phase 1, I wrote up a kind of pre-spec of 2 versions of data availability focused phase 1, one of which basically assumes the beacon proposer is the bottleneck for all blocks, and the other assumes that's the shard proposers that have the primary responsibility. So both of those, and I think we're still in the process of kind of discussing them, understanding what the trade-offs are, understanding what the trade-offs of having a kind of formal in-protocol chaining of blocks versus not bothering with that, and a bunch of other finer grains trade-offs, but generally moving forward and trying to get to a concrete spec as soon as that makes sense. And then in addition, there's still a kind of small research questions to do with data availability sampling popping up, like how to calculate these, how to verify proofs of a block size as efficiently as possible, and so forth. And so just working through those two. Another spec-related thing that I've started to do is separate it. I did a kind of draft PR separating out the light client spec into, or the basically into its own file, so that it's kind of theoretically independent of phase 1. So the goal of this is to basically try to kind of modularize the phase 0 thing, so that we're not kind of hamstrung into a particular order, and we can just do things in whatever order they become ready in. And light clients are theoretically, or the light client protocol changes are theoretically really simple, so we should be able to do those very quickly. So the PR exists.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. Any other research updates?
Yeah, STXRX has a small update. We are working on the executable beacon chain proposal. The proposal is about enshrining Eth1 execution into beacon chain and making it first-class citizen with respect to consensus. Comparing to Eth1 shard, this proposal significantly reduces the communication complexity between execution and data shards. And it also opens an opportunity for advanced use cases like instant deposits and instant withdrawals, and many other use cases that require synchronous process
Document is almost ready and going to be published pretty soon on this research. And yeah, like since the next week. So
awesome. Thank you, Mikhail. Any other updates?
Danny, I have a couple of figures that I would like to show. Is that possible?
Yeah.
All right, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, good. So we did a short experiment with the clients, all 5 of them. We were trying to see how to behave in terms of resources and synchronization with the chain. So the figure that you can see here is basically the time is in the x-axis. So we run all the clients for 1 to 2 days, sometimes even more, almost 3 days, depending on sometimes they crash. And you have basically here, the y-axis is the synchronization slot in thousands. And so, well, from this figure, we can see, for example, that lighthouses and Prisma, ones that kind of are a bit faster to synchronize in comparison to the others. Lotstar takes several hours to actually start, like 4 hours to start actually syncing process. And there are a couple of flat moments for Lighthouse in hours, 10 to 12 and 4 hours. And I will come back to this in the next figure, the next couple of figures. We also analyze the number of peers that each client connects because these are reported in the logs. And so you see here for the same 5 clients, so using the same colors. The number of peers they are connected. Teku is the one that is usually connected to more peers, over 70, and Lighthouse is 50. But there is a couple of hours where the number of connections drops for some time. And again, I will come back to this a little bit later. There is something that happened at this point. I'm not really sure what it is, but we're still investigating. Prism is super stable in terms of number of peers. And it's always kind of around 30. And then, well, Lotstar and Nimbus also kind of more or less stable between 20 and 40 peers, between 20 and 30 for Lotstar. We analyze the disk usage for all the 5 clients. So in this figure, you have actually 2 y-axes. So because we want to compare how the disk usage relates to synchronization with the chain. We see that Teku has a kind of interesting behavior in kind of a zigzag in which the disk usage goes up and then it goes down dramatically, and this is repeated periodically. So we believe there is some kind of cleaning process that happens in Teku client that makes this pattern. Maybe the Teku guys can explain this better. And then, well, Nimbus and Prism have both quite low disk usage. But there is a weird thing that happens for, there is a sharp rise in disk usage after our, I think, number 3. And then it's stabilized and then it drops again. So I think at this kind of cleaning process that happened and then it came back and it was going steadily again until our 19 or 20, where it started to increase the disk usage sharply. I don't know if this was a non-finalization period or something related to this, but it arrived to the point where it's related the whole disk of this 35 GB. So it crashed at that point. It could not sync anymore, and so the flat becomes line. I have to precise that all the clients were running on the same nodes, but they were running at different times. So Teku and Lighthouse were running together in 2 different nodes in parallel. Prisma and Nimbus were running 2 days later in the same 2 nodes, and then Lotstar 2 days later. And then when the CPU usage, we can see that Prism, Nimbus, and Lotstar usually around 50% of CPU usage. This is a node with just 1 core, but 2 threads, so there is hyper-threading. It seems these 3 nodes, 3 clients are not using hyper-threading, so they probably use 1 thread. It stays about 50% most of the time. Teku and Lighthouse, on the other hand, they do have about 100% utilization of the CPU, most of it, except for the moments where the synchronization becomes flat in the case of Lighthouse. And then we see that there is a clear kind of 0% usage of CPU at that time. That also happens for Prism at some point. I think in hour 35 or something like this, there was 1 hour in which there was no synchronization. So the syncing line became flat and there was 0 CPU usage for like 1 hour or so. We also measured memory. So in this case, we can see that Teku and Prism are the ones that use more memory. So the node had about 5 gigabytes of memory. We see some kind of periodic sharp decreases on Prism on Prism memory usage. So I don't know if this is some kind of a state cleaning or something that happens periodically inside the client, but it's kind of periodically. In terms of memory resources, the one that is more light is Nimbus. So it looks like this is a client that is really made for light hardware, and so it requires little memory usage. And then in between we have and Lotstar. Again, Lighthouse have these like flat lines of memory when there is desynchronization issues. Disk usage start to increase. We can see that also the memory start to increase until until hour 24 when it kind of become flat, and then the memory becomes kind of flat. We also analyze network, but I don't want to make this too long, so I'm going to just stop here, and we're going to publish short on all this. So if people from the clients can have some explanations for some of these things, or you think this is something interesting, come to reach us, and maybe we can discuss. So I'm going to post in the chat a first draft of this report, and I will be happy to receive as much feedback as possible. That's it. Thank you.
Can you say when you did tests? Because I guess all clients are changing a lot from weeks to weeks.
Yes, all the tests were done pretty much last week. So I can from which time and which time from which time to which time each client was running, and we can also provide you the version of the client that we use, and any other details that you need. Yeah, we can post all that in the report. I think it's not in the draft that I will post the link right now, but we can add this into the report. Yes.
Cool. Thanks, Leo. Share if you have some stuff you want to get some input on. Share it before, and then we can just bring it up for questions rather than going over it all live.
Okay.
But thanks. Cool. Other research updates. Okay, great. Networking. Thank you for the feedback on the issue I opened up a couple weeks ago. We've been kind of had my hands full with things, but I have a work in progress PR to update based off of that conversation, and I'll get that up for review today. That's with the kind of how to handle block sync and weak subjectivity in some cases there. Any other networking items people want to discuss today?
Just quickly tested the scoring parameters that was being suggested on Toledo. They seem to be really well, so we're merging that down, or have merged that down to master. So if other people are looking for scoring parameters, the ones we're suggesting to suit the network.
Great. Have you dropped an adversarial node up there to see what happens?
Not yet. I kind of want some validators in there, so I talked to Preto about that.
Gotcha. And you've been working on some, modification of the client to make it evil. Is that work still in progress?
Yeah, that one I've kind of put on hold because we're focusing on some mainnet things, but I should take that off ice and get that back in there to test the scoring.
Yeah, gotcha. Other networking items? Other networking items? Okay, great. General spec discussion.
What do people think about this idea of kind of unbundling all the post-zero items more and basically treating them as kind of separate components with no kind of necessary assumption of sequentialness? So the three I'm thinking of in particular would be, one is sharding, the second is light clients, and the third is the merge.
I'm pro, especially because on the sharding and the merge stuff, there's a lot of like art, so the exact timeline is unclear. I think it'd be good to have light client infrastructure beginning to be developed before anyway.
I think it's a very good idea.
Wasn't the point though that you would want to have light client infrastructure before the merge, so you can basically continuously have light client support for ETH1?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of
Having
dependency,
light client support before the merge is definitely a strongly preferred, but I guess I'm not worrying about this because light client support is by far the easiest of the three items, and so like I'm recommending we even stick it into the first fork after Genesis, like 5 months after or whatever, if we can.
Right. I mean, from a consensus standpoint, light client support is extremely minimal and reuses infrastructure that we have been using, Gossip and committees essentially, Gossip and a committee, and so even the complexities of supporting light clients, then we can build on after. But getting that support kind of native into the consensus is very easy. So something that I think makes sense to ship ASAP.
Okay, I mean, you heard that coin me care about stability. I've rejuggled the roadmap again.
Does anyone actually listen to this call?
At this point, do we still think that phase 2 is like will ever have like any meaningful instantiation anymore, or is that just basically something that is just an outdated term at this point then?
It's probably an outdated term in that it implies that it will happen. But I personally think we have enough on our plate in terms of data availability, sharding, and merge to get done and kind of see how the rest of the ecosystem develops. You know, if in the meantime, the use of data availability for scaling and things is like a total unbelievable flop, then that would be information to continue moving forward with a full-blown phase 2. But in terms of R&D effort, I think that it's definitely on ice right now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Cool. Anything else on just general spec? And thank you, Trenton. I'm glad that you're listening. Kevin too. But yeah, anything else? Great. Open discussion. I think that probably a lot of y'all saw that the EF announced this like staking community grants round. I just want to plug that here. This is really to kind of enhance and start to support more actively things beyond the core infrastructure, the core client stuff. So if you're listening and you're building stuff that makes the validation experience more delightful, or you want to start building something in that domain, check it out on the EF blog. There's a form and you can, it's not on the blog, but I will blog about it tomorrow. There's a link, but check it out. I posted on Twitter. And client teams, if you have some stuff that you would like to see and it's not on that wish list, or you have some teams that you're friendly with that you want to get involved with this, please share. Okay, anything else before we close today?
No.
I wanted to bring extra attention to the slashing database regeneration problem. That seems especially important for people staking on at home and on unreliable storage media like SD cards on Raspberry Pi. Does anyone have any insight as to how tough this is to implement and what it might take to get this through?
So specifically, this is looking back at consensus and constructing the slashing database as best as you can from messages that actually got on chain, correct?
Correct. This is for the condition where you have backups for your validator keys and everything, but the storage media you're using for the machine that's running your validator client, that fails, and you lose your slashing database. But you still have your keys, so you can restart your validator, and you would need to regenerate your slashing database from on-chain data.
Right, which gets you potentially in a good spot, and not guaranteed. This could be done independent of the clients now that we have this interchange format. So maybe we want to support a script that uses the combination can do this independent and give you that format, and then you can bring it into any client rather than asking all clients to implement it at this point.
Simply asking for opinions about how tough or easy this is and what path is the best to go ahead.
If we're going to regenerate it from chain, then we're never going to get like things that we cast like say way in the future, like a few hours in the future or whatever. So we're only going to get things up to like the time now because they're the only things that exist on chain. So perhaps instead of bothering with like going back through all the history and collecting everything, we just use the slashing interchange format has like a low watermark. We just say like, from now or last epoch, just never produce another attestation again.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. So the format does have this like minimal format where you just say don't do anything before now.
That stops you from joining a chain that's not finalizing potentially. So that would be the only disadvantage of that, and that might. So I agree. Like most of the time, that solves that problem. But there are times where you would want something more advanced, and that's
Yeah, you're right. So if justification's not advancing, then you won't be able to produce an attestation.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it's never going to be perfect. Like, fully agreed. It could be that someone got an attestation on the and never published it, and then they just use it to slash you later. But I mean, that case is very rare, I would guess. And most of the time, it's just like you innocently lost your storage for some reason.
Yeah, you could. That's a good point. You could also argue that if there's not much finalization, there's quite potentially a lot of forking. So it's probably not super safe in that case. But that's just a guess.
I mean, an ideal.
Donko, we can't understand you. There's a lot of wind.
Right. Sorry, it's windy.
We can hear
an
you
ideal
now,
implementation would search mempools and I don't know, block explorers and stuff. But
yeah, I suppose a block explorer could provide it as a service. I have a question related to that. Paul, you mentioned if you sign things far in the future and maybe had broadcasted them or something, and that's in particular an issue because you can create these surround conditions, and that was something that Duncan brought up on an ETH research post, and a small note in the validator guide made it into the recent release on essentially a validator should kind of protect itself from signing things that advance time in very unexpected ways into the future to prevent these inescapable message signings that create really bad surround conditions. Our clients have heard of that, and is there any effort to try to protect users against this case?
Not from our end. It sounds a bit tricky because you're into timing territory. Like if you can't trust your system clock, it gets pretty hairy. I would personally wasn't aware of it. I'm not aware of any works on our end to mitigate it.
So my suggestion would be refuse to start the validator client if the last entry in the slashing database is more than X hours, or more than say 6 hours, which shouldn't happen in normal operation. And if you're just restarting after an extended outage, then you probably have an operator present anyway, and they can just set an override flag. Yeah, I know this happened, and like start anyway. So that seems like a very simple solution that should cover almost everything.
Yeah, the case is definitely concerning. You know, if somebody gets you to sign essentially the last epoch of all time as your target, then you've created this like ultimate surround condition for yourself. Let's say client teams think about it a little bit, and maybe we'll bring it up in some internal chats. It's definitely something I think worth considering on how to protect the users there. Okay. Anything else to say before we close? Great. Good meeting. Appreciate y'all coming. And happy Paramount launch. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.